and welcome to episode number 7 of DFO Rundown Insider Edition. Irfaan and Gaffar here, alongside my very good friend David Pagnotta. This, a presentation of Bet365. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. I'll get to my picks for the weekend a little bit later on in the program. But David, first, how are you?
I'm well. I'm a little bit better considering I live in Toronto and the Leafs actually won a game. So, people are not about to jump off cliffs or anything like that, but doing okay. How you doing?
Sky is seemingly falling a little bit here in Vancouver as well, but it's interesting because we're at that point in this season now where fan bases are looking at their teams and some want to, relieve the head coach of their duties. You saw a head coach in the market that you're in, be given the vote of confidence by his general manager, Brad Treliving, in a State of the Union, just over 20 games into this season. Starting to see more and more GMs go and do that. But gauging temperatures around the league is always interesting at this point because we're at the quarter point of the season, getting to American Thanksgiving, where you kind of, see who's in and who's not. But when you look at hot seats and who may be on it, what do we think and what's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, in Toronto, Tree did this last season. He did a quarter, a half, and a three-quarter poll marker in the season where he addressed the media. And he wasn't unsolicited in his commentary about Craig Berube. He was asked about him a few times, which is why he said he has full confidence in his coach and the staff. They're not making
he did say right now.
Well, yeah, I mean, if they lose 15 in a row, then I think, you have to reevaluate. But as it currently stands, there's no coaching change imminent in Toronto. They're not thinking about it. Berube has 2 more years left on his deal. They pulled a victory out of their you-know-whats last night against St. Louis. That was a bad hockey game across the board. I mean, Berube and everyone are saying the Leafs, we played tighter and this and that. That's great. It was still a bad game for both of those clubs. But anyway, I digress. I'm not anticipating any coaching change in Toronto. And I know a lot of people in Alberta are going nuts as well for something. But you just signed Knobloch to a 3-year extension in Edmonton. The Flames signed Huska to a 2-year extension. You're probably not signing these guys and then making a coaching change 2 months later. So I get it that, everyone's going nuts about this and losing their minds, but, maybe it's the roster construction that is not up to snub for some of these teams. Maybe the realism is Toronto's not deep enough. Edmonton's not deep enough right now. The Flames aren't that good right now. So you have to take all of that into consideration. You can make the easy fix and just whack the coach, but you still have the same guys on the roster. And maybe there's an uptick in performance after a game or two, but then eventually things just go back. Like if Willie Nylander didn't score that overtime goal in Toronto, there'd be a shitload of criticism on his game last night. There were some moments where he was JT Miller-esque and whatever the hell JT was doing last night in that game. So, sometimes you got to put a lot of onus on the players. Sometimes you got to put some of the onus on the GM too. They're the ones that are constructing these teams. And to Tree's credit, he opened up by saying, look, this is on me. I take full responsibility. I'm the one supposed to put this team together. No, I don't expect a coaching change in Toronto, Edmonton, Calgary anytime soon. Maybe, if anything, across the league, Nashville is still the one that I'm wondering about because Bruno's got another year on his contract, only one, and then it's a team option. I think with the changes that we're expecting to see in Nashville roster-wise, it wouldn't surprise me if eventually they make a change behind the bench, but I'm not expecting one north of the border anytime soon.
It's funny you mentioned Nashville because they're a team that we've talked about a few times on this program, and I'm sure you have on many different channels here on Daily Faceoff as well. But the coaching change would be interesting to me because I think it would be Barry Trotz who would be going between, going on the bench, and then who would be the GM there? Is he promoting someone? Is there something going on like that? But obviously we would have to wait and see there. What is the latest on the Nashville Predators, and when do we think that they might just blow this thing up?
Well, I mean, it was nice to win Friday night in Sweden, in Stockholm. But then they forgot to play the second game, it seemed. And Pittsburgh just rolled over them. I think we're getting to the point where, they're open for business, that they're willing to listen on almost anybody. We're starting to see, look, every time we bring this up, I don't mean we, I'm just mean in general, media. It doesn't mean that the team is actively shopping the player, but Philip Forsberg's name is starting to make the rounds. And I can tell you, he loves it in Nashville. He certainly would not want to initiate any of those types of discussions by any stretch. He loves it there. A lot of guys love it there. But we're starting to hear his name. And I think it's more of teams just inquiring to see, hey, if you even consider this, what would be the price? And when you're ready, give us a call because we want to have a conversation. I think Nashville is willing to listen, like I said, on a variety of players, on almost everybody, because I think they just want to understand what their options are and how quickly they could go through a quasi rebuild / retool here if they move out, 3, 4, 5 players this season. So whether it's Ryan O'Reilly or some of their pending UFAs like Michael Bunting and some of the, Halla and others, they're going to get a lot of attention. And I believe that, Trotz and Brian Poyle and everybody there are starting to listen and saying, let's, look, you have interest in our guys. Let's get the ball rolling here. This isn't the season we anticipated, even though we're only at the quarter mark, but we're going to listen and, let's start getting those, quasi unofficial offers, because it's still early, across our table. And then let's evaluate.
Philip Forsberg with an $8.5 million cap hit through 2029, 2030, full no move clause for this season, next season, and the season after, and then a 15-team no trade list for the year 7 and 8 of his contract. That name interests me a lot because obviously the Nashville Predators are going to be open for business, like you mentioned, but that would say full rebuild. Like if you're getting rid of your best offensive player, you're blowing this thing up and you're starting from scratch. And then my question changes completely and it goes, what do you do with your captain? Where does Roman Josi lie in that equation?
Yeah. Look, if Forsberg is willing to, and we're talking hypotheticals now, so ease up on getting radioed myself. But Forsberg, if he were to accept a trade and waive and sign off, that means to me that they illustrated to him that they're blowing it up completely and going through a full-on rebuild, a la Chicago, a la San Jose, and so on. If that's the case, then then I'm Roman Josi going, what? Because clearly, as the captain, he would be aware of that as well. So it's like, well, what do I want to do here? Do I want to go through a rebuild, or do I want to, as I'm getting up there, chase a championship again? I'm UC Saros. Do I look at this and go, I'm going to backstop this group that's going to have not a lot of top tier talent on it? Like, there's so many other questions that kind of revolve around that. And again, like we're talking hypothetical here because I think Nashville will listen, but until they're blown away by some type of offer, they're not going to go to these players with no moves and say, hey, would you consider? This, and this. They're going to wait until they have something secure to say, we've got something in place here. We still got to figure out a few details. But before we get any further and waste everybody's time, would you consider this? They're not there yet by any stretch, but that's the process that it's going to take. So, again, we're going to hear O'Reilly and Stamkos and Marchessault probably more than a guy like Forsberg. But if Nashville's going to listen on him, and for Josi, those are sweetheart contracts based on their capability, especially Forsberg. So, again, I don't know if we're there yet, but I do think that Nashville, it sounds like, is at least relaying a message similar to what St. Louis did a couple of weeks ago, where give us a call, we're going to listen.
And here's the thing I've always said about general managers: if you're calling a team and not asking about every player, Well, you're not doing
Yeah.
your job. Like if you're having that
Yeah.
conversation, you might as well go through 32 and some, excuse me, if you are looking to improve your team. And obviously Philip Forsberg can help improve 31 of 32 NHL teams right now. Sharks are circling. It is that time of the
Hmm.
season where GMs start to call other GMs and kind of gauge interest and see how they can go improve their hockey team. But the San Jose Sharks have been circling the win column a lot lately. Macklin Celebrini, obviously, he and Connor Bedard are now emerging as two of the young faces of the National Hockey League and starting to cement themselves in those roles. But for the San Jose Sharks, what's their plan here? Like they're still probably a few years away from legitimately being someone where they can go in and say, okay, we can get to the dance and compete. Maybe this is
Right.
a season where they do get to the dance. Who knows what happens here down the road? But what's the plan really in San Jose?
I don't think it's changed by any stretch. I think um, look, there's a reason why they added contracts like Ryan Ellis and Carey Price. Um, they have assets to move. They have assets they're willing to move. They signed players to 1-year contracts, a couple defensemen to 1-year contracts. Brought in Nick Leddy as well because the plan was going into this season. This is the next step in our rebuild. We're going to do better, but we still want to fill our cupboard up. We're still going through these rebuild steps. So, we heard Alex Wenberg's name a few weeks ago, and as some teams were just trying to figure out options. So that kind of started things a tiny bit. But we're going to hear they have 5 defensemen, the San Jose Sharks do, who are pending unrestricted free agents. All 5 of those guys are going to generate interest as the season moves along. It leads with Mario Ferrero. You've got Klingberg, you've got Leddy, you've got Liljegren, and you've got Desharnais. All 5 are on expiring deals. And the Sharks will listen on all 5. Whether they end up moving all 5 by the trade deadline, we'll see, because you need somebody to play D. But they're going to listen on these guys. It's nice to see them start taking these next steps. And I know when the season started, and even last year, teams were calling about Ferrero, and San Jose wasn't really ready. They had a very high price tag set for him. And at the time, I believe he's open to a change of scenery. I think he still is. But they're not going to rush this. But all 5 of those guys I would categorize as available, along with some other players up front on expiring deals too. They want to remain somewhat competitive to keep that, the vibe going. And when you're in the race, that's good for the Smiths, the Celebrinis, the Eklunds, etc., that are learning at this game still. But San Jose, as the season moves along, maybe not now, because everybody's focused on St. Louis and Nashville and Calgary and so on. But you're going to hear more San Jose talk as the season moves along. And those 5 defensemen are going to be talking points for a lot of teams looking to shore up their back end.
A team that you never really hear much about at all, and they've made the playoffs. They're very, early in their existence in the National Hockey League. It's the Seattle Kraken. You don't really hear too much going on with the Seattle Kraken. Things are relatively quiet as we sit and do this. 19 games played. They sit in the second wild card position, 23 points. What does that future look like with the Kraken? And are they a team that, you make the playoffs and then you have a regression, but now is it go time, or is it let's wait and see what happens time?
If there's a middle point to that, I think that's where they're at.
Well, you can't be mid. You can't be mid. The Vancouver Canucks have been mid for their entire existence.
Yeah,
you have to figure out what you are.
Take lessons out of that. Yeah, definitely. Well, I think like they're at a point where they want to add. They definitely do, but they also need to proceed with, or they feel they need to proceed with a little bit of caution, because they've got a lot of players that are pending unrestricted free agents. And you've got, Jordan Eberle and Mason Marchment and Jaden Schwartz, Jamie Alexiak and Tolvanen as well, that are pending UFAs, not even RFAs. You want to kind of proceed with a little bit of caution here. If this team is going to continue to stay in the playoff race and be part of the wild card discussion, and even one of the 3 in the Pacific, I think as we're doing this, they're just a point back. of third in the Pacific. You want to just make sure you're maintaining that same trajectory for this season. And then you look to add. Botterill's going to, certainly keep his options open. They were active in the summer. So there's a couple things here with the Kraken. One, with respect to being active in the summer, they want to add an impact forward to this group. It may not happen during the season, but if Seattle can find a way to add a winger, specifically an offensive scoring winger that slots into their top six, perfect world is a first line guy, but it's pricey. That's what the Kraken would like to do. That's atop their priority list. But again, it may not necessarily happen in season. This may be something they look at either via free agency or trade market in the offseason. But that's high atop their list. And then they got to figure out the other assets with respect to how's the season going to go. I can tell you one guy in particular, Jaden Schwartz, they've had some very loose conversations, but they plan to have a full-on negotiation and conversation about an extension a little bit later on in the season. They just want to still see, which to me reiterates the fact that, as I was just about to say, they still want to see how this season's going to go. But beyond that, Seattle, whether it's now, this season, or in the summer, absolutely want to add a top six winger, ideally a first line guy. But that's something to keep an eye on as things move along for that team.
Seattle, an interesting market too. Don't know if it's very high on the list of places where you can try and attract, people with no trade clauses wanting to go, especially with the trajectory of the team, where they are, how many young guys are in the pipeline. They have an insane facility, both the practice facility and the actual rink that they play in are both beautiful facilities. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next little while with the Seattle Kraken. We mentioned teams wanting to add and talked about some young guys, talked about some guys that are a little bit older, a guy like, Philip Forsberg. Evgeny Malkin is one of my favorite players, always has been, since he entered the NHL. It would be very, very, very bizarre to see Evgeny Malkin wear any other jersey for his career than the Pittsburgh Penguins one. Where do we sit at with that?
Yeah, his name has started to creep up a little bit this week across the board in a few reports. He did an interview with RG Media and just reiterated that he just can't see himself in another jersey.
Yeah, can I?
Yeah, no, the same. Like that, he's and you know what? In camp, he said Penguin for life or Penguin forever, whatever it was.
Forever,
him, Crosby, and Letang, just not being able to see him or those two guys in different jerseys. He opened it up at the start of the season as well, saying, I just want to see how this goes, how I feel, and then figure it out from there. The plan is to have a conversation in the second half of the season to discuss what he wants to do, where his head is at, and what direction is obviously the team. Now, if the Penguins, who have surprised a lot of people, myself included, continue to be part of the playoff discussion in the second half after the Olympic break, I think they'll maintain their pace and try to obviously push for that for a variety of reasons. One, Sid, Gino, and Letang want to compete in the playoffs, Carlson and everybody. But also, what do you want to do with your guys? So they're going to have a conversation, figure out where they want to go with this team. I think if he continues the pace of play and talking to people around him, if he continues playing at this pace and they're still in that race, then I think he looks to a 1-year extension to stick around for another season just to see how things go. The Penguins are going to make a number of changes in the offseason. That seems to be clear, regardless of how this season plays out. But can they escalate things a little bit? Now, I know Penguin fans are about to lose it because they're like, well, we have to go through this rebuild eventually. But they've got some pieces. Let's see how things continue to go. And I think if, again, he's a near point-a-game player and the team's playoff competitive, I wouldn't be surprised to see the discussion hover around a 1-year extension.
Yeah, it's just so hard to see it. Like, and I get it. Those guys are all so good and have been for their entire careers, but it really is it really is going to be fascinating to see what Kyle Dubas decides to do with, a guy that you just can't, like we just talked about, you can't see him wearing any other jersey. The Buffalo Sabres. This is the final team one for me. Then we'll get to what do you want to get off your chest there? The Buffalo Sabres. Saw Adrian Kempe sign his extension, obviously not getting to $11 million, but getting north of 10 on an AAV. Yep. when you look at what they're doing, and we talked about Alex Tuch in one of the early episodes of this program, David, as to what the Buffalo Sabres and Tuch wanted to do, what's going on there with Alex Tuch? Have they even started talks with his camp, or are they going to, or they kind of see how it goes here a little bit?
They're still in wait and see mode in Buffalo with respect to a number of different things, but even Alex Tuch. What I was told this morning, still status quo with respect to his situation and just extension talks. I've loose conversations here and there, but they haven't gotten back to the nitty gritty, even with Kempe signing. And I think the idea was Tuch was going to be a $10, $11 million player. If he hits the open market and is one of the few top free agents, then that number is probably going to increase. But where does that fall within that bracket? And I still think, the Sabres are trying to figure out what the hell they're doing. Just overall, direction-wise, there was all this, wild talk about Thompson and this and that and the other for the last couple of weeks. That's not something they want to pursue. But like you mentioned earlier, with respect to Forsberg, GMs, you're not doing your job unless you're asking. So, kudos to them for at least, poking a little bit. But Buffalo's still trying to figure out what they want to do here directionally. And just they want to see how things are going to play out for them this season. So for now, I guess no real update because there's just nothing going on. Still status quo between the Sabres and Alex Tuch.
You think he's a $10, $11 million player?
I think he's close to that. I had him in the 8 to 9 range before everyone started signing. I think because of his age as well, he's going to be likely in that 10 range, in that 10 to 11, somewhere in there, depending on what it is. And if it's Buffalo, and he loves it there, and he's from the area and all that stuff. You 10.5. Do you meet in the middle? Do you go somewhere in there? If you're going full term, like one of the reasons Marty Necas ended up at $11.5 million was because of his age. You're paying for, compared to Kempe, who's I think 3 years older. So you're paying for that because you're going to get more out of them, presumably, because they're more prime years. I think with Tuch, I think the Sabres know how attractive of a piece he's going to be. If they bought him out and just aren't comfortable giving him the money, or if suddenly he changes his mind, then you look to the trade market in the second half of the season, and you probably get a haul for him. But that's likely where he's going to be, especially if he hits the open market. We got to keep getting used to this. The numbers are going up across the board.
Cap going up. I mean, he will be 30 years old in May of 2026, finishing the final year of a contract that pays him $4.75 million, does Alex Tuch. All right, anything else you want to get off your chest before we shut this thing down?
Not much. We touched on a lot. The only other thing would be the Montreal Canadiens. Just keep an eye out on them. I know there was a lot of chatter about adding to the fourth line. They want to see where things go with and I mentioned this on Montreal radio as well this week. They want to just give their younger kids an opportunity, give the guys in the A an opportunity to see if they can claim a spot. There's no question they still want to add to their group. They still want to add a second line center. And we've touched on this throughout the season. I don't think it's exclusive to that position. That's the ideal. So we'll see kind of where things go. We know that Nazem Kadri is on their list, their target list, and I believe he would waive to go there now that he's got his no. I don't think Montreal's on his no trade list. But it's a hell of a price, and I don't know if the Canadiens are there yet. But they're going to continue to scope around for a top 6 guy and let some of their younger kids kind of see if they can claim spots in their bottom 6 for the time being.
All right. Well, lots of games to be had, lots of things going on this week in the NHL. Let's take a look at what I like this weekend as a presentation of Bet365. David, I'm going to Long Island, the New York Islanders at home against the St. Louis Blues. The New York Islanders have been a wagon on this road trip. We know a few people involved with the organization, a few longtime friends of those New York Islanders faithful, but I like the Islanders. I like what they're doing. I like the cut of their jib, as they like to say. So give me the New York Islanders and give me the Florida Panthers in a Stanley Cup final rematch over the Edmonton Oilers. Like Florida, we talked about earlier in this program, is Edmonton just not that good? When are they going to turn it on? I don't think it's going to be on Saturday against the Florida Panthers, but we'll see. As this part of the show is a presentation of Bet365, whatever it is, it's never ordinary. Bet365. Download the app, get it on the game, use code NATION. Bet365 must be 19 or older. Please play responsibly. David, thank you very much for this. Appreciate you, as always.
Yes, sir. You too.
All right, Jacob Lazar hitting the buttons, making us look good in this. This was episode 7 of the DFO Rundown Insider Edition.
Hey, hockey fans, if you enjoyed that video, then make sure you hit the subscribe button right here on the Daily Faceoff YouTube. We have you covered for everything you need. Exclusive interviews on The Sheet with Jeff Merrick, all the latest hockey news on Daily Faceoff Live, and you can always get your morning started with Johnny Lazarus and Colby Cohn on Morning Cup of Hockey. Don't miss a minute. Hit that subscribe button.